Welcome back, everybody. Our guest this morning is Beverly Engel. Now, Beverly has been a psychotherapist for some 30 years, specializing in the areas of abuse recovery, relationships, women's issues, and sexuality. She's also a best-selling author of 20 self-help books, which she has been featured in the national media on shows like The Oprah Winfrey Show, CNN. She's also written for O Magazine, Cosmopolitan, Ladies Home Journal, Red Book, and the list goes on. Well, she is considered one of the world's leading experts on the issue of emotional abuse and is a pioneer on the issue. Beverly joins us this morning to talk about her latest book entitled When Your Partner Has an Addiction, How Compassion Can Transform Your Relationship and Heal You Both in the Process. That book was co-authored by New York Times best-selling author Christopher Kennedy Lawford. His books include Symptoms of Withdrawal and Recover to Live. Beverly, good morning and welcome.
Yes, good morning. It's good afternoon for me, but yes, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Indeed, indeed. First of all, Beverly, I'm interested in the collaboration with Christopher. Many people will remember Christopher as a Kennedy and also remember him as an actor on All My Children and General Hospital. Talk about how you guys came together on this particular project.
Well, our publisher actually put us together. He had some ideas, and I have been working in the area of compassion for a while, and he was very interested in that topic too, in terms of addiction. And so, we spoke and realized that would be a good collaboration.
Sure. Well, so when you pick up the title and you look at compassion, a lot of people would say, I've been through the ringer with my partner and I am all out on compassion. And you deal with that in the first 2 chapters. Talk about why you deal with the area of compassion when it comes to helping a person who is, and you don't even call it an addict, you call it substance dependent.
Yes. Well, first of all, we need to be compassionate toward partners, because certainly it's difficult, if not almost impossible at times, to be the partner of somebody who has either an alcohol or drug dependency or has a dependency on, what's called sexual addiction or food issues or any dependency issues. It's really, really difficult for partners, especially with alcohol and drug dependencies. So we need to have compassion for partners. And what I talk about in the first couple chapters is just trying to help people get clear as to whether or not they have had it or not. It's completely understandable if they've had it and they need to walk away. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But so many people stay in the relationship even though they have, they've had it. They stay in the relationship even though all they do is fight with their partner and criticize them and, make themselves and their partner miserable. So I'm kind of challenging people to say, look, if you're going to stay in the relationship, then there are things that you need to change. If you're going to leave, great. I totally understand. So I just try to make it clear that it's your choice if you stay, and here are some things that you can do to change yourself and hopefully change the relationship.
Right. And I love that because in the first 2 chapters, you go through everything that person, that partner probably has lived through. And you say, okay, after this, let's make a decision. And once you've made the decision, let's get to work. Now, getting to work starts in the 3rd chapter. But you're changing the paradigm of recovery, and you're changing not only the paradigm, but the verbiage and everything about it. Talk about why that is so important.
Well, mostly, I guess, because what we've tried so far hasn't worked. And we need to change the paradigm. We need to do something different. Because it's, as people know, we've tried many, many things for many, many years, and it's not working. So let's try something new. And there are people who are doing research all the time, God bless them, and finding out what does work, And so now we have new information, so let's use the new information that we have.
Indeed. One of the things that you talk about and you write about throughout, even in the title, is compassion. And I think that it's important to first break down what compassion is. And I love the way that you did it in the book. And you talked about where compassion comes from. Share a little bit about that.
Well, when we have compassion towards someone, we actually join them in their suffering. We don't just feel bad for them, but we actually join them in it, and we try to imagine what they're feeling, what they're going through. And it's a Buddhist concept, but it's also a Christian concept. It's a spiritual concept to step into somebody else's shoes and try to be there with them.
Right. And so what you do within that compassion is you help that partner break down their spouse's or their partner's issues and help them to better understand why they have become what you call substance dependent. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I have a couple of exercises in the book to help people gain that compassion that I just talked about. Most people who become dependent, again, on alcohol, drugs, sex, food, shopping, I mean, there's all kinds of dependencies, but, most people just do think about alcohol and drugs primarily. But we need to understand the reason why people become dependent. And what they have found in research is that almost everyone who becomes alcohol, drug, or any other substance or activity dependent has been traumatized in a major way. Primarily, they've been traumatized with child abuse and neglect, but they could also have been traumatized by the loss of a parent, by being abandoned, by being bullied. I mean, there's other ways, but trauma is the major commonality.
Sure.
And so it's not just that people are lazy or they don't have enough will to stop or they have an addictive personality. It's, if we really break it down, we discover that they're using their dependency, substance or activity, to cope with life, to self-soothe and self-medicate. And we've been hearing about self-medication a lot.
Indeed.
And so if you can find out why it is that your partner is inclined to use a substance or activity, that's going to help you have more compassion for them. And not everybody who has a substance dependency even knows themselves why it is that they're using. And so I have an exercise where I have the partner write about what they imagine their partner is feeling, why they are feeling pain or shame. If their partner has shared with them about their childhood, they may know, but sometimes our partners don't share with us. So, sitting down and kind of asking your partner, tell me more about your childhood. Tell me, what the major things that happened to you in your life, so that you can become more aware of those major traumatic events that are probably the primary motivation for the dependency.
Right.
And then write about what you've learned, and then write about why you think your partner uses like that. Is it self-medication? Is it self-soothing? Is it distraction? What are the reasons that you can think of why this person would use this substance or this activity? So it's just a way of kind of gaining more compassion and more empathy.
And really almost trying to help yourself or help the person who is going through with their partner get a better understanding of what that emotional turmoil has been for all of those years. There's a saying, I think, in this 12-step program that you're only as sick as your secrets. And often those secrets are so tightly and so closely held. And you talk about that especially for men who have been abused as boys, that is something that is unspeakable.
Yes. Yes, and if you're referring to sexual abuse, yes, absolutely. There are so many men who were sexually abused as a child who never speak about it. They just absolutely never speak because sexual abuse, child sexual abuse, is very shaming for both boys and girls, but it's especially shaming for boys. Boys are raised that they're supposed to defend themselves, they're supposed to be tough and big and strong, and if somebody has sexually abused them, then they can't handle the idea that they were victimized. In our culture, we have a hard time lately, letting somebody be a victim. I mean, victim has become a bad word. Boy is victimized. He has such shame about it. He believes he should have been able to overtake his abuser, even if his abuser was a big, tall, burly man and he was a little boy. He still believes that he should have defended himself.
Sure.
And he has this shame that there's something wrong with me that he chose me, or there's something wrong with me that I didn't, fight him off hard enough.
Right.
So yeah, I'm glad you brought up secret.
Sure.
Yeah.
Let me get a break right here, Beverly. But when we come back, we'll talk about the family dynamic and how important it is. Stay on point. We're back right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. Our guest this morning is Beverly Engel. She is considered one of the world's leading experts, and she has co-authored a book that is absolutely thought-provoking. I know I say that a lot, but for families and couples who are dealing with addiction and who absolutely feel like you're at your wit's end, this is a conversation that is so important. The book is called When Your Partner Has an Addiction: How Compassion Can Transform Your Relationship and Heal Both of You in the Process. And so one of the things that you write about, Beverly, that I think is really critical is this new approach for change. And it's an acronym called KRAFT. Tell us about that.
Well, it's not my program. It's a program that is offered by some researchers.
Sure.
And we just found that the program had some really good ideas that were comparable to ours. And basically it treats the entire family. When someone who has a dependency comes in, they also have the entire family come in from the very beginning. Like we know in 12-step program, we know in regular recovery programs when somebody goes into recovery, they have the family come in at some point. But this is different. This is involving the family from the very beginning. And it's educating the family from the very beginning to do some of the things that we've been talking about, creating a new attitude, using a new language, normalizing the situation, assuming your partner has a reason for using, learning more about substance dependency. And so they treat the entire family alongside of treating the client, the identified patient.
Right.
So it's an extremely collaborative process that they have found that really works.
And so I think it's really important, Beverly, to speak to not only the partners, but as we talk about compassion for the partner who is substance challenged or substance dependent, as you write about in the book, that the whole family is sick when one person is dependent, whether it's alcohol, sex, drugs, whatever it is, that the whole family really is tainted by that person's addiction.
Yes. Yes. So the family receives a lot of compassion too. They receive a lot of compassion and validation that yes, it has been difficult. Yes, it is difficult. It's empowering for them as well.
Right. And so one of the things that you talk about, I think that's really critically important, is the difference between codependency and compassion, because the line can get skewed if you're not careful.
Yes.
So tell us the difference.
Well, there's lots and lots of differences, but mostly I start with having the partner do kind of a motive check when they're going to take some action. they're going to be brutally honest with themselves before they do something or before they say something. So I present three questions. Is helping my partner a way for me to distract myself from my own issues? That's a major issue for people who have what's normally called codependency. Is that, it's a really good way to ignore your own issues if you're always focused on your partner. So if you have a conversation you want to have with your partner, or you want to insist that your partner change something, or you're really, really angry, I ask the partner to check in with themselves first. Have I been addressing my own issues? Is there something going on with me that I'm projecting onto my partner? The next question is, do I want to rescue my partner because it makes me feel worthwhile or needed or important or proud? Is that one of my reasons for staying, is that I really feel really good when I rescue my partner? And rescuing can be anything from your partner drank too much the night before and you call his boss up and say he's sick that day and he can't come in when he really has a hangover. Okay, that's rescuing behavior. That's not really helping him, because he's not having to face the consequences of his actions. Right. And that's a big part of the program, is you don't rescue your partner. You're supportive, you're compassionate. You may even, depending upon how involved you get, you may even sit down with your partner and create a program together as to what you're both going to do. But right. You don't rescue.
Let me stop you right there, Beverly. Let me stop you right there, because I think this is really important for those codependents. First of all, when you are a codependent, you have to identify as one. And I don't know that a codependent is really that ready to be honest with themselves, because they're just as sick as the person who is dependent in a lot of cases. So how do you deal with that, that gut-wrenching honesty that person needs to have to really fix themselves first, Right.
Well, I start by talking about, really looking at how much time do you spend on self-care with yourself?
Right.
Are you spending, time taking care of your own needs, making sure that you allot time to, get a massage or exercise or eat properly? Are you really taking care of you first? If you are, great. Then right. You're in a good position to be really, more of a collaborator with your partner. But if you're not taking care of your own needs and you haven't addressed your own issues, I have some quizzes in the book about trying to help you really look at what your needs are. But like the self-care assessment, just has I won't read all of them, but am I aware of what I am feeling at any given time? I am able to recognize and meet my own needs. This is yes or no.
Right.
I am able to ask for help from others. I set reasonable expectations for myself. My inner voice is nurturing and warm. So those are kind of self-care assessments, things to focus on. And then, really being honest about what are your issues.
Right.
Do you have some unresolved issues from your childhood? It's really interesting, of course, that most people who are involved with someone with a codependency issue were also traumatized in childhood. So have you gone to therapy and dealt with your childhood abuse or your childhood shaming experiences or your abandonment issues? Some of the emotional issues that people who are normally called codependent have are abandonment issues, fear of intimacy, dependency issues, control issues. So, look to yourself about, what are your unresolved issues? And then, commit to spending some time either in therapy or in a 12-step program or just on your own, really focusing on your issues first before you even attempt to get involved in helping your partner.
Right. And don't you think, though, Beverly, that that's the biggest issue, because that person is usually so busy taking care of the person that's dependent that they really don't take care of themselves?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I want to go
It
ahead.
ends up being a good excuse not to take care of yourself. You know, I'm so busy taking care of him or clearing up his messes or covering for him or whatever that I don't have time for me.
Right.
You know?
And at that point, I think that's why the whole family involvement is really critical, because everybody, when there is a person who is dependent on drugs, sex, alcohol, gambling, whatever it is, everybody needs to find themselves first. Let me get a break here, but when we come back, we'll unpack how compassion can actually help heal the family. Stay on point. We're back right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. I know this is one of those deep, hard conversations, but Beverly's book, When Your Partner Has an Addiction, How Compassion Can Transform Your Relationship and Heal You Both in the Process. It is something, Beverly, that is so important, and I think that if you're not careful as the partner who's trying to help and who's trying to be there for the person who is substance dependent or activity dependent, you might lose compassion. And so there are some behaviors that are going to have to be changed in order for compassion to be revitalized and to be lived in the relationship. Aren't there?
Absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about that.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question exactly.
I said there are a lot of behaviors that have to be changed when you're talking about restoring compassion.
Yeah, there's three that are really, really important. One is that you really need to notice how often you shame your partner. Shaming is the absolute worst thing you can do to somebody who's alcohol or drug or otherwise dependent. They have enough shame already. They already feel horrible about what they've done. They may not show it to you. They may not act like it. They may defend against it by pretending that they're not shamed, okay? And they may not show you that shame at all, but I guarantee you they are horribly shamed already.
Right.
They know when, they may not remember what they did at the party last night exactly, blow by blow, but they know themselves enough. They can imagine what they said and what they did. They get looks from people. They even probably feel shame that they have had a blackout. Because,
right.
Can you imagine wondering what in the world did I say or do? They have enough DUIs or they've been arrested enough times or whatever. They know that they are, not behaving well, that they're behaving badly. And so they have a tremendous amount of shame. So you shaming them on top of that is only going to cause them to become more defended. People can only stand so much shame before they have to build up a wall between themselves and others. And that defensive wall actually prevents them from connecting with other people and themselves. And so your shaming your partner is only going to make them more defensive, and it's going to cause more distance between you and your partner.
Not to mention resentment. Not to mention the resentment that will build.
Pardon me?
Not to mention the resentment that will be built from shaming.
Absolutely. That's probably your good point. That's the core of their resentment toward you.
Right.
Is every time you point out how terrible they are, they're just going to build up more and more resentment.
Right.
And they're not going to believe that you're on their side. You want your partner to believe that you're on his side, that you really want to help him or her.
Right.
Okay? Also, another thing that really behavior that blocks recovery is arguing. First of all, you absolutely don't ever want to argue with somebody who's using at the time. That's just a waste of time to argue with somebody who's drunk or somebody who's on drugs. You're just wasting your time. But arguing just gets you into the problem and gets you steeped in it, and there's no way out. And you end up feeling frustrated, and he or she ends up feeling frustrated. So you don't want to argue. You don't want to jump into that.
And so how do you help, especially women who want to argue because they are pissed, they're angry, and they want to argue? So what do you say to that woman who her husband has spent the money. He's come in loaded, and she wants to argue. So what do you say to her partner?
Okay, well, first of all, don't have any kind of discussion when he comes in loaded.
Okay.
You know, you just have him go to sleep, and you talk about it the next day or when he's gotten over the hangover or whatever. Mm-hmm. But I encourage in the book, that's one of the things that the partner needs to take responsibility for, and that is their anger. Again, I have all the compassion in the world. Of course you're going to be angry.
Sure.
But if you choose to stay in the relationship, you need to take responsibility for your anger, and that may mean that you find a constructive, healthy way of anger release. Okay? Mm-hmm. Maybe you need to take up boxing. Maybe you need to put, a punching bag in the garage. Maybe you need to go for runs and yell while you're running. Right. Maybe you need to drive into an isolated place and roll the windows up and scream. Mm-hmm. But you need to get your anger out. That anger is toxic, and it's going to hurt you, and it's going to spill over on your partner. If you're going to be yelling at your partner, there's no way you two can really resolve the main issues. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you've got to take responsibility for releasing your own anger.
Right.
Okay? And I think that's choosing to stay.
Right. And I think that's really important.
In fact, you need to watch your tone of voice. We can be very shaming and very angry with our voices. Uh-huh. So you should need to have a tone of voice that's either just objective or that's compassionate.
Wow. Okay. And so what's the last thing that you would say to the partner?
Well, you need to really create a compassionate environment, which involves a lot of things. We don't have time for everything, but
sure.
You want to provide a place for your partner so that he can share his suffering with you. Again, if you're arguing with him, if you're shaming all the time, if you're constantly complaining, he's not going to be able to tell you how difficult it was the other night when he went out with his friends and to a party, and they were all drinking and he didn't. And he was really tempted, but he didn't. He can't even share that with you if he doesn't feel like you're a safe person to talk to. Okay?
Right.
You want to be the person he can share with and, be either supporting him along the way or even collaborating with him. And the collaborating is like, again, creating a program together to help him find alternative rewards for his behavior. He can't just give up the drinking or the smoking or the drugs and go cold turkey. He's got to find something else that's going to help him to self-soothe and to manage his emotions. And you two could work that out together if you're really on board with him. Mm-hmm. Okay, if you're really helping him, he'll feel open to your ideas, but you can't impose your ideas, on him. It has to be a collaborative effort. So you need to create a compassionate environment.
Right. And I think for people who have tried and are trying, this really helps families and wives or partners understand that you have to do something different, because I know for years I put in the same thing, dealing with these issues. And every single time, Beverly, I expected something different. And nothing different ever came out until I started to do the work on me and started to put in something different. And I really think that takes a lot of time and a lot of growth. How do you talk to people about putting those different things in to get a different result?
Yes. Well, first of all, I do encourage everybody to go to therapy or a self-help program or something, even if it's just gathering some friends who have the same problems and meeting every week and talking about it. But in the book, I have a way to create your own self-care program. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the primary thing. You've got to find out what your issues are, and then you have to start taking care of yourself. Take some of that energy that you've been giving him and arguing with him and shaming him and getting frustrated. Take some of that energy and put it on yourself. Mm-hmm. And so you need to become self-compassionate.
Right.
And self-compassionate is the same thing. It's addressing your own suffering, and that's what we've been talking about, looking at your own issues, and adopting compassionate self-talk. So most people who are, well, most of us, but most people who are either codependent or dependent have really critical self-talk. So listen to your head. Like, what are you saying in your head all the time? Are you always putting him down, or are you always putting you down?
Right.
And if you hear that, then adopt self-compassion for yourself. Like, you know, I know how hard this is, you know.
Right.
It hurts to see somebody is being so self-destructive, or boy, this is really tough. You know,
Absolutely.
I'm doing the best I can, but boy, sometimes I feel like giving up.
Absolutely.
That's just an acknowledgement of your own pain and suffering.
And you know what I did, Beverly, with my partner? I never shamed him. But what I said to him is, this is what you're doing. This is not who you are.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I think we have to empower that person because we know that they are bigger than their circumstances. And for all of us, I think we have to shame, and just tell the truth. And then when you're honest about the situation, then you can start to get help and start to recover and have that compassion that you need. Beverly, it is an absolutely phenomenal book. It covers every area of every problem that you could have in addiction. And we just really honor the fact that you have taken so much care in writing when your partner has an addiction. Thank you so much for joining. Before you've got to go, tell people how they can connect with you and how they can get the book.
Okay, well, they can get the book from Amazon or probably any online bookseller, and they can order it from their bookstores. That doesn't necessarily, you know, I don't know if it's actually in the bookstore right now because they have such limited stock.
Sure.
But you can always order it, and you can always get it on Amazon. And my website is Beverly at Beverly Engel, ENGEL.com. And I have articles and ways to connect with me and all kinds of things on the website.
Very good. Beverly, thank you so much for taking the time. We really greatly appreciate it.
Well, thank you for such great questions.
Indeed. Hey, everybody, stay on point. We're back right after this. Good morning, everybody, and welcome. I'm Carlette Christmas.
And I'm Glenda Stock, and this is our final point today, On Point.
Our guest this morning, Glenda, was Beverly Engel, and she has written a book along with Christopher Kennedy Lawford. Many of you will remember Christopher from All My Children and General Hospital. His mother was a Kennedy. She was siblings with President Jack Kennedy. And he's also a New York Times best-selling author. And their book is When Your Partner Has an Addiction, How Compassion Can Transform Your Relationship and Heal You Both in the Process. Now, what they're not talking about are those partners who have endured abuse or endured what you would consider to be unspeakable and irretrievable relations. She's talking about those relationships that can still reconcile and heal through the power of compassion.
Right. Powerful subject, and certainly a book that unfortunately is probably needed in more homes than we realize.
For sure.
You know, people that have walked that journey. And you can just identify on almost every single page, if you've been around someone, either loved ones or relatives or neighbors or friends, you can just see this whole thing unfolding. And you're absolutely right. The word compassion in conjunction with this sometimes seems like an oxymoron.
It does.
Know, it's like, how on earth can I be compassionate? But the one thing I heard from our guest this morning loud and clear is, what are we doing as the caregiver, I call it? What are we doing to really have an awareness of our own needs and deficits?
Right.
Because our tendency is to perhaps use the other's weakness as a blame for our weaknesses,
right,
as opposed to really realizing where our shortcomings are. Because, you know, the old adage is so true. You cannot help others if you do not help yourself.
Right. Put the oxygen mask on yourself first.
And if you have not done that self-assessment to know where your trigger points are,
right,
and where your hot buttons live, and what you need to do to perhaps allay those, they're going to raise their ugly head.
Indeed.
And doubtful that that mixture is going to be very good with someone who is out of control already.
Right.
You know?
And I know living this that for many, many years, Glenda, I pointed the finger and I said, if you wouldn't have this, you are the problem. And the thing about pointing that finger is we've got 4 pointing back. I thought for many years, maybe I had 1 or 2 things, but really you are the problem. And so it's not until one can get gut-wrenchingly honest.
Right.
And people will hear me talk about this on the show a lot, about my own self-truth. I am in search of that and seeking my own truth all the time, and this process of recovery, and it is a process,
yes,
has really shown me that before you can help anyone, you've got to really understand yourself,
right,
and know your own truth.
Right. I love how she draws the family into this process. Having had a niece who was terribly addicted, and reached really the bottom.
Dependent is what we're calling it now.
Okay,
New verbiage.
Dependent. Thank you for correction. But you know, having reached the brick wall, which she really did, you know, and finding herself finally in a program that was 18 months, you know, not a 21 day.
Right.
But what had to happen also with us as a family, you know, so often we just want to fix things for someone.
Right.
We just want to fix it and put a bow on it and make it go away and not have to have that painful recovery process, which is the opposite of what has to happen. It is not an overnight fix, neither for the family or the dependent.
Absolutely.
And I think that the author has made it so clear that each of us finding our compassion and finding a way to communicate, changing behavior, you know, realizing that what we have always done, you know, it's the old story of the Titanic, you know, we rearrange the chairs and expect something different, you know, when in reality that's not going to be the course of action at all. And you know, your heart goes out to families that find themselves in this scenario because no one wins. No one wins.
No.
And this, you know, the children, the dependent, the codependent, nobody is winning here.
Right.
And so her effort is to try and educate people on a day-to-day living basis of how to find ways to connect, with each other so that you can be salvaged and that people can be made whole again and that they can recover. And, you know, of course, my faith always brings me back to that center point, that's the hope anyway. That's the real hope.
Right.
You know, is to look up where our strength comes from.
Right.
But certainly having an understanding of the need to hold your tongue.
Right.
Avoid the criticism.
Right, and the shaming.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably one of the worst things that we can do to anybody. And, you know, I say in just that the verbiage has changed from addict, but she even talks about changing that from substance dependent and activity dependent, you know, because for years it's been called the addict. And that's another way she felt, or that the research has bore out, that it's shameful. And it is true that everybody in the family suffers when there is a problem. Not just one person is affected. All are affected. But I love the way that she translates compassion. Compassion means we suffer with them. And whether you want to or not, if you stay in that unit, you do. You suffer with.
Yes, you do. Even if it's by nature of how people treat you, you know, and because they're mindful of you know, the challenge that lives in your home. You know, people who have become close to you are aware of that.
Right.
And so they are constantly making, you know, accommodations for that, or you're not getting invited to those scenarios that otherwise you would, because people are aware of the challenge that you're dealing with. So yeah, there is a suffering process for all concerned. So I think it really is smart and behooves us. And we know that, you know, the AA groups and all of those help groups have been out there for years and years and years. But the statistics do not tell us that this issue is getting any better in our country. In fact, it tells us the opposite.
Right. When you look at, Glenda, 22.2 million people,
it's just unfathomable almost. And you know, unfortunately, a lot of those are prescription drugs now that we know people are becoming addicted to, and that is creating a whole nother set of circumstances because people find themselves doing what the professionals have prescribed for them to do, only to discover.
Become addicted.
Exactly. So a powerful topic, one that I hope that all families will pick up this book and have it in your home. Trust me, it is a guidebook that you need and you want if you have this going on in your household.
Great last words. We're out of time for now. I'm Carlette Christmas.
And I'm Glenda Stock, and this has been our final point today on Point.
Stay with us, everybody. We're back to wrap up right after this.